Well, let's turn to Matthew chapter 5. I want you to hear the words of Jesus, and I want you to take them to heart this morning as we continue on this 2-week series. Is it a series if it's just 2 weeks? It is a continuation of last week. Matthew chapter 5, beginning at verse 13. And I want to just read the verse that we focused on last week as well as the couple for this week. It begins in verse 13. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. Verse 14. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden, nor does anyone light a lamp and put it under a basket on the lampstand, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. Turn to your neighbor one more time and say, you are the light of the world. Have you ever noticed when Jesus talks, he makes assumptions? He makes some assumptions. When Jesus is talking about us or about life, he makes assumptions. For example, there's a passage of Scripture where Jesus said, when you pray, so there's an assumption that he makes, right? He's assuming you're going to pray. There's actually another place where he says, when you fast. Did you know that Jesus assumed you would fast? Did you know that he assumed you would fast and you would pray? He said, you will, in this world, you will have trouble. Somebody say amen. Amen. There's an assumption, assumptions that Jesus makes. And I want to look at 3 assumptions just before we get into the meat of this passage. 3 assumptions that Jesus makes about your life and my life today. Number 1, Jesus assumes you will do good works. He just assumes that's what you will do. You will do good works. Everybody say good works. The word good in this case is kalos, which can mean lots of things. You will do good works. You will do beautiful works. You will do better works. You will do honest works. You will do honorable, valuable, virtuous. You will do works that pertain to a positive moral quality. You will do fine and praiseworthy works. You will do commendable works. Jesus assumes that you as a follower of his, that you being filled up with his life will be a person who just does good works. I like that assumption because I don't know that all of us assume that we are going to do good works. I don't know that we think about that. I don't know that we plan for that. But I do know that God expects you will do good works. What is a good work? If we're not careful, we'll limit and we'll put good works in a box. Good works is when you go and you help the poor, right? Good works is when you feed the hungry. Good works is and we put this box around good works. But I want to suggest to you that one of the ways you do a good work is when you love your wife. Husbands, you're doing a good work because that's a commendable thing to do. When you respect your husband, wives, there's a good work that you're doing in your life. When you honor your parents, children, that is a good work that you are doing as part of a follower of Jesus. So good works when you honor others, when you give to those in need, when you share the gospel, when you help someone. Good works is a very broad spectrum, and I want you to be thinking about that today as we go along. So he assumes you will do good works. Secondly, he assumes that people are going to see your good works. He said, so that when you do good, your good works will be seen, right? So he assumes that other people will see your good works. In 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 12, it says, keep your behavior excellent among the Gentiles. Those are the people that haven't found God yet. Those are the people that don't know God yet. Keep your behavior excellent among those who don't know God yet. We could say it that way. So that in the thing in which they slander you as evildoers, they may, because of your good deeds, everybody say good deeds, because of your good deeds, as they observe them, people are meant to see your good works. They will glorify God in the day of visitation. Did you know that your life was meant to be seen? Your life was meant to be noticed. Your life was meant to be acknowledged by others. People ought to see something about your life and know that there's something different that is to be noticed. Your life is meant to be lived out in front of others, seen and noticed. And that means, by the way, if your life is going to be seen, you're going to have to spend time interacting with people that are watching and living next to you. You need to look for opportunities to be seen. How many of you are looking for an opportunity to be noticed? Anybody? A couple people. Most of you are not looking for an opportunity. Can I ask you to change that attitude of your life and look for opportunities to be noticed? It's part of what we've been talking about with boldness is look for an opportunity to be noticed. When Doug took that time in the apartment to say, can I pray for you? It was an opportunity to be noticed, not to draw attention to him, but the next assumption that Jesus makes is because God will get the glory. So 3 assumptions he makes about your life. You're going to do good works. People are going to see it. And because of that, God's going to get the glory. You and I ought to be looking for opportunities to be noticed for God. Is that a different way to think about your life? Tomorrow when you get up and you head to work, you ought to be thinking, how am I going to be noticed today? What about my life is going to be noticed today for God's glory? How are people going to be turned in their hearts to God because of my life today? God gets the glory. And I want to suggest to you that we need to become better, and we talked about this in the previous series about boldness, but we need to become better at the pivot, right? At the pivot from me to God, from me to God, from me to God. Why are you praying for me, Doug? Why are you praying for me on the phone? Because somebody's going to ask, and the answer is always because Jesus, because God, because it's always the pivot to God. It's the turning to God because you were meant to be noticed, and when people notice, they're probably going to ask you a question eventually, and you pivot that thing to God. I was thinking yesterday at Tim's house, we were there working, and there were some people there that I didn't know. There was one guy in particular that was there that I didn't know. I didn't know anything about his background. I didn't know if he was a Christian or non-Christian. I didn't know anything about him. And Dwight Miller was there, and he starts talking to me about Noah's Ark, which he and Chris went to see Noah's Ark out in Kentucky. And it's in Kentucky, right? Yeah, and they went to see Noah's Ark, and he starts talking about Noah's Ark, and as he's talking, he starts talking about Jesus and how Jesus saves us, and he's just like declaring the gospel of Jesus right there, and I'm thinking, I wonder if these people here even know about Jesus. I don't know if they did or not, but it hit me that he had no problem pivoting to Jesus, just declaring. It wasn't just about how many of you have been to see the Ark? A few of you. 1, 2. Only a few of you have been to see the Ark. We should all go. Next week, we're all going. Instead of coming to church, we're going to get on a bus and go see the Ark. I don't think they're open on Sunday, though. But he took that opportunity, and I don't think he was intentionally at all. He just starts talking about Jesus. I love that. I hope that in your life, that when you have opportunities to talk to people, Jesus just comes up. If he doesn't, work on that. Work on the pivot so that your life keeps turning people to Jesus. Amen? Because Jesus' assumption is that you will do good works, people will see your good works, and that God will get the glory. Amen? All right. So I want to talk to you today about being the light of the world. In light of that, let's talk about being the light of the world. What are four ways we can understand light? How does light work? What does it mean to be the light of the world? By the way, I got to take just a break from this 4 realities of light, and I want to take a step back, and I want you to look at your neighbor one more time, and I want you to say, you are the light of the world.
You are still the light of the world.
I said this to somebody recently, you are the light of the world. And they said, Jesus is the light of the world. I said, yeah, but Jesus said you are the light of the world. Do you know that he didn't say, you have my light in you and you will shine my light to the world? He said, you are the light of the world. That's amazing. That is incredible. Look at your neighbor again. Say, if you don't get anything today, you are the light of the world. And I'm watching now to see who's not participating. You are the light of the world. This is so important. He made you the light of the world. Your life is the opportunity for the world to see light. Amen? So 4 realities of light, and we're going to look at what light does and then what you ought to do as a light of the world. Number 1, light warns. Everybody say light warns. Lights are a warning. They can be a warning signal to us in our life. This morning we were driving to church, and as we came to one of the traffic lights, it turned yellow, warning us that it's about to turn red, and I did not speed up. Slowed down and stopped. Because there was a warning. A light was warning me something is going to happen here that you ought to be paying attention to, right? So lights can warn us. If you are driving along at night and you see red lights flashing behind you, what does that mean? Not red lights, Webb. You got to learn the lights. Red lights behind you means there's an emergency. It's a warning that there's somebody, you need to get out of the way. Now, if you see, Webb's ready for the lights that he's seeing behind him. The blue lights, that's a warning. You better slow down and get yourself in line because it could be, yeah, right? But they're warning lights, right? Lights can be a warning to us. If you're on a ship somewhere and you're out on the ocean and it's dark and you see a light out there, what does that say to you? Well, it could be another ship, but it could be a lighthouse, which would mean what? Warning. Don't come over here. It's not ship area. Lights are a warning. Everybody say lights warn, or light warns. Lights send a message. They have these flashing lights now on the intersection lights. Have you seen those where you're coming down and you see a light flashing? Even if you don't know that an emergency vehicle is around, there's a warning that there's one nearby getting ready to come through that. Y'all aware of that, right? So lights warn us. One of our roles as light in the world is to be a warning to people around us. Because you are the light of the world. Your life is meant to warn the people around you that life matters, that holiness matters, that living for Jesus matters, and there is an end of life that you're either going to spend eternity in hell or in heaven. And your life is a warning to people that what I do, how I live my life, the choices I make matter. The very act, by the way, of living a righteous and holy life is a warning to people around you. Because how many of you have you ever heard something like this? Oh, does he think he's so? Have you ever heard that? He thinks he's so righteous. Have you ever heard that? Have you ever said that? You know that when you are living in an unrighteous manner and you are living in an unholy and a dark place and you see light, it causes you to think about what you're doing. And it will bring about a warning in a person's life just by seeing you live a holy life. In John 3:20, I want you to take note of this. It says, everyone who does evil hates light. Everyone who does evil hates light. I want you to think about that in the context of today. You are the light of the world. So everyone who does evil hates you. Because you are the light of the world. Are you following me? So it should be normal for us as Christians to understand that there will be people who are not walking in the light of Jesus who hate us. That sounds counterintuitive. That sounds like, well, that doesn't seem good. Then maybe we should sort of step back and we should sort of cover up our light a little bit so that we're not so offensive to people around us. Does that sound familiar? Let's cover up our light a little bit. I mean, I feel that sometimes. I feel like, maybe I don't want to be offensive. Especially today, offensiveness is such a high valued reality. You can't offend anybody. Don't offend anybody. It's so offensive. But Jesus said, you are the light of the world. Jesus also said, everyone who does evil hates light. Let's pack that away and say, okay, so in other words, I'm supposed to just continue living as light and let the people hate the light because Jesus said they were going to hate the light, because one of my roles is to bring a warning. Whether they love you or not is not the issue. Whether they see you is the issue. And here's a question. The people that I was talking with a friend the other day who works in a construction business. I've never worked on a construction crew. I have only ever heard about what it's like to work in a worldly construction environment. Anybody else ever heard of anything like that? You ever experienced it? I've only heard it's very, very hard to live a Christian life and to be the light in that kind of a setting. Amen? Because it's so dark. But the question is, wherever you spend your days, do people see light? Or do they see something else in your life? Because you are the light. You may be the only light that person will ever see. And you serve, just like those lights we talked about, you serve as a warning that eternity matters. Because you gave your life to Jesus, you are living as the light of the world. You make the greatest difference in a person's life. C.H. Spurgeon, some of you know who that is, some of you don't know, most of you don't care. But he's this great preacher from the past. And he said this. He said, the Spirit of God through them fully confines the world of sin, of righteousness, and judgment. In other words, when the light of God is shining through you, you are limiting the amount of unholiness that can be around you. Cool. That's really powerful, because your light is a warning. Your light is transforming to the people around you. So number one, light warns. Number two, what are the realities of light? Light attracts. Light attracts. When I was young, probably 6, 7 years old, I remember driving somewhere. We lived in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, and I remember driving, and I noticed this beam of light shot straight up into the sky. I don't ever remember seeing it since then, but I looked it up. Actually, Caleb and I were talking about this the other day, and he said, you mean like searchlights that they used in World War II, bomber searchlights? Has anyone else ever seen anything? I mean, these things are huge. They're like 5 feet around, and when they turn those things, have you ever seen one in action? Anybody? They're amazing to see. And I remember I could not figure out what it was until we drove by, and it was, they had it at the drive-in theater to draw attention to people to come to the theater, which, you know, we didn't go to the theater when I was a kid, but we drove by. It was on Route 11, and it was right there. But here was this searchlight attracting people. Light attracts. Light draws. You know, if you put a light on outside, you're going to attract bugs, exactly. So that's sort of somebody said anytime that, you know, the light of Jesus is shining, you're going to attract all kinds. So just expect you're going to have all kinds with you. I know there's a spot up near Harry and Crystal's place, or close to there, at Christmas time. There's a whole bunch of lights, and they flash all in tune with the music, right? And it attracts all. How many of you have been there? You've gone there just to see the lights, because you are attracted by the lights. Lights attract. Everybody look at your neighbor and say, lights attract. Now, this is really good, and this is your opportunity. Look at your neighbor and say, you're attractive. Because you're the light of the world, and lights attract, right? You're attractive. Rita, I want you to do it one more time to Jim. I just like to see that one more time. It was so sweet. She won't do it. Light attracts. Light draws. Now, this is sort of the opposite from warning, sort of the light that's like, hey, warning, pay attention. This is a warm and inviting light. This is a light that attracts people to it. This is when someone lives in the genuine love of God and people see it and are attracted to it. Those same people, by the way, who hate the light are also attracted to it. You know, the words that they're saying and the way that they're reacting to you as a light of Jesus, it may sound like it's really bad, but here's what you can know. Light attracts. The light of Jesus always attracts. It's attractive to be in the light of Jesus, to be the light of Jesus. And so they are also attracted to the love of God. John 13:35 says this, by this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another. I just want to say that when you live as children of God, you are the light, and when you love others, that is attractive to people. We already prayed about the situation in Charlottesville. We could name all kinds of things where hate and where love is missing. You can see it in homes, you can see it in communities, you can see it on Twitter, you can see it on anywhere. I mean, it's not a very loving world right now. Amen? It's very animosity driven and proving and one against the other. And when someone sees genuine love of brothers and sisters and genuine love of God, it's attractive and it draws people to that, because everybody wants to be loved. Amen. Everybody wants to be loved. We're made to want to be loved. And so you as a light attracts people. Colossians 4, 5, and 6 say, walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of the time. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. Walk in wisdom towards outsiders. I want you to think about how you're living your life, the people that are around you. Are you walking in wisdom? Are you walking in an attractive love of God? Are you walking with the light? I read, of course, there have been quite a few posts on Facebook yesterday and today about this situation just in Charlottesville. Again, it brings lots of things out. But I read a post that, I don't even remember who posted it, but somebody was talking about sitting on an airplane, and the person next to them had grown up as the son of a full-fledged KKK member. And the story was that as they grew up, they moved to South Carolina or one of the Carolinas, and I think he ended up marrying a person, a black person. This is obviously a white person, and they married a black person. And their father, long story short, the father became open to it and eventually gave up his beliefs of KKK and racism and began to embrace the reality. But the story was told by a Muslim woman who had been sitting on the airplane talking to the son of a former KKK member. Are you following? And she said, here I sat because this person was open to talk to me, wasn't concerned about my gender, wasn't concerned about my race, wasn't concerned about my religion, was just open to me. That is an attractive light. That is an attractive light. When you are loving to everyone, you are an attractive light. You are a light that attracts. Number 3, not only does light warn and attract, but light guides. Light guides. When we were, back when I worked for the computer software company, I flew a couple of times with a guy named Marvin Shank. He's actually Linda Davis's brother. And he flew us down to a little place called Cumberland, Kentucky. And we landed it was an airport, and I really mean to put it in quotes because it was like a hangar and a runway, and that's it. And it was literally as we're coming in, people are golfing right next to the runway. There's a golf, and so we flew in, and one evening we got there late in the evening. And so as we were coming in, there were no lights to guide us onto the runway. Now, when it's dark, it's important to have lights when you're in an airplane, right? And so as we're coming down, he's starting to, and he was kind of a joker. As a matter of fact, the first time we flew down there, we hit the runway and bounced up in the air. This is a little 4-seater. We bounced up in the air, and he's actually in the co-pilot seat because he had his brother Merle in the pilot seat. And he turns around and he looks at us. After the bounce, mid-bounce, he turns and he says, does anybody know how to fly this thing? So that's the kind of guy we were flying with. So we're coming down, and it's dusk, and we can't see. And so he liked to sort of ratchet up the fear level of the airplane experience. And he says, hey, there's no lights. I guess we're doing this without lights. And we're all sitting in, Harvey Mast and Merle and I are sitting there thinking, please, Lord. And anyhow, he did something with his microphone, a couple of clicks, and boop, lights came on and guided us right down to where we needed to land. I was thankful that the lights came on, and I was also a little upset that he was fooling with us. But hey, he's the guy who sat me in the pilot seat for one of the flights and let me fly the plane back to Harrisonburg. I once flew a plane from Kentucky to Harrisonburg. Actually, I didn't. He took off, and then he let me fly it from there. And when we got to the place where we needed to descend, I think I made everybody in the plane sick. Because if you push and nothing happens, you push a little bit more, nothing happens, you push a little bit more. Next thing you know, you're going, and you pull, and you're going, and about 3 times of that, he said, how about if I take over? That's really just my stories I'm telling. Parking lot attendants use flashlights to guide people into the right place. Your headlights guide you. Emergency exit lights. If we were to turn the power off in this building, do you know that there would still be lights on in the building? There would be lights here and here and here. I'm an airline. Here, here, and there are no lights on the runway like this. But these lights would guide us. What? Well, actually, the daylight would guide us out of here. But you get my point. Lights guide. Right? So light also guides the people who are seeing it. You are the light of the world. And as such, you serve as a guide to the people that you interact with. You are maybe the only guide that person will ever have. You, as the light of the world, are the guide to say, where are we coming from, and where are we going to? I want you to turn in your Bibles to 1 Corinthians chapter 1, or 11. 1 Corinthians chapter 11. And I want you to listen to this verse. Paul is speaking to the church in Corinth, and he says this: "Be imitators of me, just as I also am of Christ." I want to ask you a question today. Could you say that to anybody yourself? If you're a dad, if you're a mom, could you say that to your children? Be imitators of me, just as I am an imitator of Christ. You are a guide to the people around you. Do you know that your life, how you're living your life, your works, the things you decide to do, are meant to be a guide for people around you? Are you willing today to look at your coworkers? Tomorrow morning, go into the office. You say, guys, I haven't really said this out loud, but I just want you to know, imitate me because I'm imitating Christ. Right? That's a stretch, isn't it? That's a stretch, but it's who you're called to be. You're called to be a guide to the people around you. People ought to be able to look at your life, and they ought to know this is how a Christian's supposed to be. That doesn't mean you're perfect, because you're not. It means that you know how to live your life in relationship to God. But you need to be able to say to people, follow me as I follow Christ. Look at me. You want to know how to be a Christian? Look at me. That sounds almost arrogant and obnoxious, but it's biblical. It's what? It's confident. The question is, are you following Christ in such a way that people can follow you in your life? Because you as a light are meant to be a guide of the people around you. The crux of being a good light guide is to be a good follower of Jesus, and is having the love of God in us, and is knowing who we are in Christ, and is embracing the fullness of the Spirit. Chris didn't say this, Chris Guy didn't say this earlier today, but I was standing on the front porch yesterday listening to him declare the gospel of Jesus to his brother in Christ, and talk about what it means to love your wife. And I just looked at him and I said, do you know how long I've longed to hear you just declare those things, Chris? That's awesome, because Chris is learning, even in his old age.
That's okay. Preach it, brother.
Yeah. He's learning now some things he's never known before about following Jesus. Am I right, Chris? He's learning what it means to have Jesus come into your past and heal your past. Am I right, Chris? He's learning what it means to love your wife in the way that Christ loves the church. Am I right, Chris? He's learning. And he was saying to this brother, this is what you've got to do. And I'm standing there going, hallelujah, listen to this, brother, preach it. Because he's learning to be more of a follower of Christ. Are you? Now, Chris isn't that old. Some of you are older than him. A lot of you are younger than him. I'm just here to say you can learn more about being a follower of Christ anytime in your life. Amen? And so my encouragement to you is keep learning to follow Christ. Keep learning new things, because you are the light of the world. Therefore, you are the guide to the people around you. It's important that we recognize and understand. Light warns, light attracts, and light guides. And finally, the last point for today is light is visible. Light is by nature visible. Now, I was trying to really wow my son with all of my sermon illustrations, and I was talking about this principle right here about light being visible, and he said, yeah, but did you know? He said, did you know that if you were standing in space, facing away from the sun, and there was nothing for the sun to hit, you would see nothing? I was like, wow. Well, never mind. Light is visible. I said, yeah, but if you put your hands out, you'd see the light. He said, yeah, then you'd see the light, because it would hit your hands and you'd see it. But the point of this illustration is not to tell you how smart Caleb is. The point of this illustration is to say light always goes out. Light always goes out. When I mean goes out, I don't mean snuffed out. I mean expands. Thank you. Evan, would you come and help me? He's like feeding me the words that I want to tell you today. My sons are very helpful. Light always expands from where it is to somewhere else. You get that principle? You are the light of the world. Now, that doesn't mean we're always supposed to expand. Coffee and donuts tonight, here. Be here for the coffee and the donuts. We want to expand. That's my glow? My glow, the coffee and the donuts? Oh, the light. Oh, yeah, okay. Anyhow, light always expands. I want you to look at your neighbor and say, you were meant to expand. What's that? Time to wrap it up. We've gotten outside of the scope of today's message. Light, by nature, is not focused inward on itself. Light, by nature, is always focused outward. It's always reaching out. It's always going out. In your life, as light of the world, the question is, are you focused inward or are you focused outward? As the light of the world, you are called to extend the light, to share the light, to shine the light. What did Jesus say? He said, a city on a hill cannot be hidden. He said, you don't light a candle and then cover it up. You light it so that the light will go out. For lots and lots of reasons, many Christians today are hiding your light, trying to hide your light, trying to keep your light small, trying to keep your light from being too bright because, you don't want to offend people or whatever. Our challenge as believers, as Christians, is to let your light shine before men. Let your light go out. Let your light be visible. Let your light expand. Your life, as a light of God, as the light of the world, your life was meant to be sent out to others, toward others, to be seen and reflected by others. Others in your family, in your community, others in the nation, others in the world. The question is, does your light go out to the people around you, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven? A couple of things I want to challenge you to take with you. See, I wrapped it up, Roger, just on cue, just like you said. A couple of things I'd like you to take with you today. I want you to think about being the light of the world. One more time, would you turn to your neighbor and say, you are the light of the world. You warn, you attract, you guide. You are meant to be visible. You are the light of the world. That's who you're called to be. We talk about living boldly for Jesus. Let's be the light and let our light shine. So here's a question. Ask yourself this question this week. How bright is my light? How many lumens am I aiding? Luminate. Get it? Luminating. How bright is my light? Do people see my light? Do people even know that I am a light? How bright is your light? Number 2, I want you to take some time this week and write down 3 ways that you are seen and that you guide others to Jesus. Don't get too complicated in this. Just write some simple things down. How am I seen? And how am I guiding others to Jesus? And as a family, turn the lights off in your house at night, get yourself a flashlight, and pass it around and talk about what it means to be the light of the world. You are the light of the world. That's amazing news. I know I said one more time. Last time, look at your neighbor and say, you are the light of the world. You didn't sound very excited. Come on. That's an amazing truth. We are the light of the world.